Hey everybody, it's Greg Rand. Welcome to Picking Winners Live. It's it's about almost 3 o'clock. It's exactly 3 o'clock Eastern Time on Friday. Hope you're having a great Friday. Hope your week was as good as mine, and I hope your weekend plans, although it's raining out, so my weekend plans are screwed, but we'll adapt, right? This is a Q&A show, so if you've got any questions for a real estate expert, somebody who's seen a lot, been involved in actually tens of thousands of real estate investment decisions that we've been in and around. I've got my own real estate portfolio. We've got clients that own dozens and hundreds, and in some cases thousands and tens of thousands of rental property. We focus on single family homes, but I have a background in commercial also. So one day somebody said, hey, at a barbecue, they're like, you should do a Q&A show about this. I said, okay, so here I am. If you have a question, kindly put your telephone number in the comments. My team over here, led by Austin, is going to dial you up, and then you can ask the question live on the phone. And as we do that, it takes a little time for this thing to warm up. And so I wanted to kind of do a little monologue and share with you kind of a jumping off point. So we've been putting a lot of content out over the wire about real estate investing, and there's this one theme that has gotten a huge amount of response, like 500,000 views on the video, which is about 495,000 more than the nearest competitor. So we finally had a breakout video that's got a lot of people watching it. And it centers around this concept of have a kid, buy a condo, using real estate as a long-term financial planning tool and kind of shaping it around college funding. A lot of folks look at college as a really super expensive thing down the pike. And when they have a kid, they have to start thinking in those terms. Like literally one day you're married with no kids, or just you don't have any kids. And your biggest concern is how you're going to get a ride home from the bar on Saturday night. And next thing you know, you're trying to figure out how you're going to afford diapers and then food and then college. And I love that because when you have a kid, you get real serious about having some heavy responsibility, the most you've ever had in your life. And it's super important to you, which is the big shift. I made a friend recently who's having his first child on July 4th, if it's on time. And the thing that I told him was the thing that someone told me when my wife was pregnant with our first. And that was that you haven't met the most important person in the world yet. That person's on the way. You haven't met the most. I thought that was a great way to put it, especially when all my knucklehead friends were like, oh, you're having a kid, your life is over. This person hit me with something that got me right here. And then I met her, the most important person in the world. And then later on, my son. And it's true. And it changes your whole perspective. And you start thinking like a responsible person, like, oh my goodness, I've got all this that I have to accomplish. And when you're thinking in terms of long term and you have a goal that's 18 years out, i.e. I got to set this kid up. Real estate is a really great vehicle if you have the ability to do it, to acquire a piece of rental property, one piece of rental property, season that piece of rental property over the 18-year period that you're seasoning the kid. So you mature the kid, you mature the investment, and all the way along that, in fact, I'm going to show this chart because here is a chart of home prices over the last 20 years. So this corresponds with my have a kid, buy a condo experience almost to the year. Okay, so my daughter was born, this is longer. She's only 17. So anyway, she was born right around here, and we had a real estate boom, and then we had a real estate bust, and we had a real estate recovery since then. But I lived the experience of making a commitment early, having that commitment lock me down. I was now, I could always get out of it by selling the property, but I had committed. I wasn't putting away a couple of shekels a month in order to save for college. I had made my commitment early, and now I was raising the child knowing that in the background there was this little economic machine that was chugging along. So have a kid, buy a condo is a concept that we refer to as compartmentalization. Well, what does that mean? That's a tactic that I've seen professional investors use by accident. I never saw anybody teach this. I observed it and recognized the pattern among a lot of investors that were doing it for their own account that had a purpose for a property, right? So they made an investment and there was a reason for the investment. The reason had to do with some goal they had down the line. And so for me, it was 2001. The goal was educating my daughter. Now, so I'll get to this in a second. So anyway, the goal was important. The commitment was made. And there was a lot of people that freaked out during the housing crisis 10, 12 years ago. I didn't, because what that condo was worth in 2007, 8, 9, 10, 11 was irrelevant to me. The question was, is it still occupied? Is it still generating income? Can I still hold on to it? I believed the market was going to recover. I was right. That seems real second nature to a lot of people now, but back then it wasn't so second nature. There was all talk about a housing collapse going on back then. So it didn't collapse. It corrected. It recovered. And the condo is now there. She's going off to college in a year and a half. I've got the college pretty well paid for. But here's why I bring it up. We got 500,000 views. We've got hundreds and hundreds of likes and shares, but we got a couple of dozen comments, and they're all negative. Facebook is a weird place, and that some people come here to pick a fight, it seems like. But aside from the negative comments, there are some good engagements that I'm having with people who are taking issue with the strategy. And they're throwing at me, well, the market goes up and down, up and down, up and down. And so I want to show a couple of things. One, the market doesn't go up and down, except for year by year, okay? The market went up and down one time in the last 80 years, and that was, it has been going up the whole time, and it went down one time, again, on a national scale. You can tell me, well, Southern California this and New York that, but overall in the aggregate, the market has steadily gone up. It went up too steeply in the mid-2000s, so it gave some back, and then it went back on the same trajectory that it was on all along. What's interesting, though, it does go up and down seasonally. So, springtime, when there's more demand, the prices tend to be higher. And then wintertime, when the demand is softer, prices tend to be lower. The reason for that is that the people that have to sell in the fourth quarter accept a lower price because there's less demand. The ones that don't have to sell, they hold out and they sell it in the spring when the demand is stronger again, so they get their price. So there's a negotiating arbitrage that happens in the on the annual basis in the fourth quarter. But that's not what people mean when they say the market goes up and down. They think it means that the housing market is like the stock market. And you can't always blame them because they lived through the last, the 10 years ago occurrence. But the comments have been interesting and the engagement has been interesting when it's been negative, because there's a lot of people that buy into headlines on housing. And the headlines on housing, the stories are usually written before the data comes out. Then they spin the data any way they have to talk negatively about the housing market. And I'm not sure why. I can speculate, but I won't. But they do that. And so part of the reason why we put out so much content here is that I want you to look at these charts. On the left-hand side here, you're seeing a chart that's at renterswarehouse.com/research, or you could put in any county in America and see this long-term price appreciation chart for that county, for the state that it's in, and for the country. And just trust me when I tell you that if you have any interest in this asset class, this is a pretty cool place to come and play. It's free, no obligation. You don't even have to register to use it. It's just there for people to start to see the kind of things that we see as professional investors and maybe make some decisions around. In any case, the point of this is the arguments that I've seen from people tend to be, well, here's what happens during recessions, and here's what happened during the 80s, and here's what happened 10 years ago. And they're missing my point, which is the reason why this investment plan worked for me for my college fund and works for a lot of other people for college and for retirement is that you make the commitment early and then you just ride the time frame. Okay, if you've got a long-term time frame, I didn't freak out when the market turned down because I wasn't looking to utilize those dollars at that point. It didn't matter to me that I had lost some value over here because I wasn't looking to use the money. I had the intestinal fortitude to ignore the housing crisis as it pertained to my portfolio, because my portfolio was basically germinating and growing and being harvested much, much later, all right? And so when you think in terms of college, 18 years, you think in terms of retirement, 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Like if you're a young person, you're probably looking at a 25-year career. If you start whatever your job career is, if you start a real estate investing career at the same time, that can begin with research. You save money, you plunk down a sizable down payment, you start one of those little economic engines, like pull starter, right? That's the way I think of it. Like you start the engine running, and then you live your life. and you let time pass. And as time passes, real estate, if history keeps repeating itself, will get more valuable year by year. And every 10-year period in history, it's gotten more valuable. The only time it's gotten less valuable is that one short-term correction. But again, in that correction, if you bought at the peak in 2006, you are still ahead, right? So even during the worst, peak and then trough, the trough was temporary, it came back. So even if you bought at the worst possible timing in modern history in the housing market, you still did okay as long as you didn't freak out. And so that long-term planning aspect is what kind of links you to something way out into the future that will allow you to ride out the storms as they come, all right? So I heard comments like, well, what about taxes? Well, I'm generating income, so these are income-producing properties. The reason why housing in particular is such a great way to secure financial peace of mind long-term is that you buy the unit, it gets more valuable, you rent it out, it pays the expenses, the profit goes into another account or just into your household. The best thing to do is to use the profit to pay the mortgage down faster. I was supposed to do that with my condos. I didn't do it. The discipline wasn't there. But I was making $400 or $500 a month in extra income on that condo for the last 15, 16 years. If I had taken that money and set it aside, which I was supposed to do, I'd have even more money for college set aside. But I lived on it and stuck in my checking account. Point is, the reason why this thing works is that it links up really well with human nature. Instead of I've got to put $100 a month aside, there were times over the last 15 years, 16 years that it was a little bit tight in my household. All right, I'm an entrepreneur. I started a business. I didn't pay myself for several years during the starting of that business. I might not have set money aside for college. I might have tapped the college fund. My wife would have killed me, but I might have done it. Right? But I can't tap into this condo. It just sat there and it moved up gradually. So that's part of the thing here is that people throw at me, well, if you had invested in ETFs in the stock market, well, that's great. If I put the money aside every single month and never touched it and left it alone, that might have been good. That would have required monthly discipline through 2 economic crises, a couple of stock market crashes, all that intestinal fortitude I would have had to have. That's like guts to hold on. I had none of that worry. All right. I linked this thing to something important that was long-term and left it alone. And because of that, it worked. I didn't screw it up because it really would have taken a lot of effort on my behalf to screw it up. Like you can't wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning in a cold sweat and then sell your real estate with a couple of clicks, but you can do that with other forms of college funds. So just my point is for folks that are debating me online about whether that college fund idea is a good one, please understand it in its holistic nature. That it's not just about this investment vehicle versus that investment vehicle. It's about the nature of this investment vehicle and how well it plays out over a couple of decades. Okay, anybody else want to talk to us?
Hi, I live in Georgia and I am interested in investing. I am 26, single with no children, free and clear of debt, and have around $30K in cash and $3 to $4K a month after taxes to use. I don't mind remodeling while living and feel I am very capable of hands-on work. I'm looking for advice and connections. I am most comfortable with Southeast Georgia.
Ethan in Georgia, he asked this question in writing. He's 26 years old, which is great, very young. He's got 30 grand in cash, which is also great. He's churning out an extra $3,000 to $5,000 in extra discretionary income. That's how he saved the 30 grand. So you're in a great spot, Ethan, and I love what you're saying. So Southeast Georgia, let me tell you first of all what I think of that. Anything in the Southeast U.S. is being elevated because of the population and migration coming out of Boston, New York, D.C., Chicago, Detroit, Ohio. There's a lot of cold markets that the population is pouring its way down to the Southeast. A lot of it's not making it all the way to Florida. It's making it to the Carolinas and Atlanta, specifically in Georgia. But we're starting to see a different pattern happen now, and that is that the major markets in the Southeast, which are getting slightly saturated by investors, Atlanta, Charlotte, Tampa, Orlando, Jacksonville, Nashville, Dallas, Houston, those markets are a bit saturated, and guess what's happening? The secondary and tertiary markets are starting to show up and become very popular. So like we're representing investors who are making purchases right now in Huntsville, Alabama, and Birmingham, Alabama, and Little Rock, Arkansas, and Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Columbia, South Carolina, and Gainesville, Florida, Panhandle of Florida, all these places that were not major dollar destinations for investors in the last 10 years are becoming that way because a lot of the same fundamentals exist. And so when you say Southeast Georgia, I love that because Southeast Georgia, depending on how far south you're talking about, some of that is a suburb of Jacksonville. Right? Jacksonville's right up against the border. But it's places in the Southeast, these secondary markets that are starting to catch on, that if I would love if we were able to talk live, because I want to know what town you're talking about specifically. I'd be wanting to know what economic drivers are causing population and employment growth in that market. I'd be wanting to know what are the quality of life factors that are drawing people in. Are people waking up to the value there of the quality of life and cost of living? Are folks coming in from those colder, more expensive, higher density origin places in the Northeast and the upper Midwest? And the research that you can do to try to discover gems like that maybe nobody else is paying attention to, where if there's population growth, there is increased housing demand, period, right? It's not complicated. People like to live indoors. People like to adopt dogs. They like houses, right? There's very core human nature fundamentals that accrue to the benefit of owning housing. And so if you find a place, some of the research, in addition to the data, again, look at this thing. I've got free data here where you could put, he didn't put a location in besides Southeast Georgia, did he? We've got population charts on here. We've got migration charts, all right? Unemployment rate, employment diversity. You put your county in. Employment diversity will show you the different job categories of that county that make up the job base in that county. So you start looking at these raw fundamentals. You start doing searches of Google, like city council approves blank. Well, what do they approve, right? I just bought a couple of properties in a place called Belmont, North Carolina, where a train station got approved that it's going to bring people in 15 minutes to the center of downtown Charlotte. It's a block and a half away from an old mill that recently got renovated to be high value condominiums. So that's going to elevate the values in the little neighborhood where I bought. And there's another old mill that is in the process of being gutted. And what they're doing there is a mixed use facility. So restaurants, a theater venue, and some apartments and some stores, okay, all walkable. So this is all stuff that other people are doing that are going to make the value of the property that I bought more valuable. And I can discover these things by reading the minutes of the planning board meetings, by paying attention to what's being proposed to the planning board, by understanding what the mayor or the city council, how they feel about turning around some of the more banged up parts of their community. All right, so that's the stuff. You find that Southeast Georgia market, dig in, show up at planning board meetings, right? Be the only guy in the back row who's actually there just to get a feel for what the climate is towards investments and business in that town. You're going to find there are some little old towns in the South that are going through complete turnarounds where breweries and coffee shops and quality of life retail is moving in, which then brings in pedestrian traffic, which if you can buy something nearby walkable to that, well, then you're going to win. All right. Don't buy in a place that only has one factory or one major employer, unless that major employer is so robust and is going to be there for a very long time that you feel super confident about it. But I like what you're saying, Ethan. I think 26 years old, throwing off an extra $4,000 a month means that you're probably living, either you're making a ton of money or you're making great money and living humbly, in which case you're going to be in a situation where, let's see, you're 26. So 24 years from now, you'll be my age. You keep this kind of track up and you won't be working unless you really like it by the time you're my age. What I would also recommend, Ethan, is set a target of how much real estate you want to own, how much America you want to own by the time you're 50. I know 50 sounds to you like 1 foot in the casket and waiting, but it's not. All right. A lot of life left ahead of me, I hope, and you'll feel the same way when you get there. But if you've got, I don't know, 25 houses, you buy one a year and pay them off by the time you're 50. That seems pretty manageable for a guy with your kind of discretionary income. One house a year for 25 years paid off means that you're the king. You do whatever you want. All right. So thanks for asking. Anybody else interested in chatting today? Okay, I'm going to pull the plug because I got some people coming to my house. Thank you for watching. We appreciate it. Please share this with your friends on Facebook. And if you have any questions, you can email me at grand@renterswarehouse.com. Have a wonderful weekend. Thanks.